My name is Linda. I'm 58, a widow for nearly 4 years now. And every Sunday, I cook dinner for my son Ryan, his wife Ashley, and their 2 children. It's something I started doing after my husband Mark passed, hoping it would keep some sense of family tradition alive. Last Sunday, I woke early like I always do. I set the roast to marinate, peeled carrots, and made Emma's favorite garlic mashed potatoes from scratch. I even pulled out the cloth napkins because Ashley once said she liked a proper table setting. I wasn't expecting a parade, just a little warmth, maybe a hug, but when they walked through the door, I barely got a glance. Ryan didn't kiss my cheek like he used to. He dropped his keys on the counter and went straight to the living room, flipping on the football game. Ashley followed behind, wearing a new coat I hadn't seen before, tapping on her phone and frowning as if walking through my house was some kind of inconvenience. The kids brushed past me with the wild energy only kids have. Emma asked if they could go to the backyard, but before I even answered, they were gone, already racing toward the swing set. I stood there for a second in the kitchen doorway, hands still damp from chopping herbs, wondering when exactly I had become a piece of the furniture in my own home. The table was set, the candles were lit, and the food was exactly as it always had been. But something in the air had shifted. They sat down like they were fulfilling an obligation, like Sunday dinner was just another box to check before the week began. Ryan complimented the roast, almost out of muscle memory. Ashley picked at her plate, murmuring something about cutting back on red meat. Then it happened. Right in the middle of dinner, Ashley looked up from her phone and asked, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, how it felt to be so used to being alone. She said it lightly, like a joke, something about how I must be comfortable with isolation, since I'd been abandoned already. Her voice was casual, like she was asking about the weather. Everyone laughed. Even Ryan chuckled. I didn't. I put down my fork and looked around the table. The house was silent, except for the sound of the game playing in the background and the clinking of silverware against china. I wanted to scream. Instead, I breathed in, slowly, and said something I didn't know I'd been carrying in my chest for months. Let's see how you all survive, without the unloved one paying a dime. No one said anything. Ashley's fork hovered midair. Ryan finally looked up. The silence hung thick. And that's when I realized they hadn't just hurt me. They had forgotten I was a person entirely. There was a time when Sunday dinners felt like something sacred. Mark would help me in the kitchen while Ryan set the table, folding the napkins in those odd triangles he thought looked fancy. Emma would sit on the counter nibbling carrot sticks, and little Jacob would tug at my apron, asking how many more minutes until dinner. We'd eat slowly, passing dishes around, talking over each other in the best way, laughing too loudly. Ashley was different then too. She used to ask for my potato salad recipe, tell me how much she loved the way I seasoned my green beans. Sometimes she'd stay behind and help me do the dishes, chatting about her job or some show she and Ryan were watching. I clung to those dinners after Mark died. They gave me something to prepare for, something to clean the house for, a reason to pull out the good china. I told myself it was tradition. Family needs ritual, I thought. It keeps us connected. It keeps the memories alive. I didn't realize how quickly those memories would begin to fade for everyone but me. The change didn't happen overnight. It crept in slowly, so gradually I almost missed it. Ryan stopped helping in the kitchen. At first, it was because he was tired. Then it was because he was busy. Eventually, he stopped asking how I was doing altogether. Ashley went from helping with the dishes to checking her phone, from asking for recipes to making suggestions. Less salt next time, maybe try something more modern. She said it with a smile, but it never felt like kindness. The way she pushed her food around the plate made me feel like my effort had somehow become a problem. The kids were the last to change, but even that shift came eventually. They used to run to me, arms wide, shouting grandma like I was the best part of their week. Then one Sunday, they just walked past me. Emma mumbled a hi, without looking up from her tablet. Jacob went straight to the backyard, without even glancing at the cookies I'd baked. I told myself it was just their age. That's what kids do. They grow up. They get busy. But somewhere deep down, it stung more than I wanted to admit. It wasn't just that they were growing up, it was that they were growing away from me. No. When they visit, they ask for snacks and Wi-Fi. They talk about shows I've never heard of and roll their eyes when I offer to play board games. I sit there at the table while they laugh about things I don't understand, while Ashley checks her phone, and Ryan half listens to me talk about my garden. I used to feel like the center of the family. Now I feel like the background, the one who refills the drinks and clears the plates, the one who makes sure everything is ready, so they can eat, complain, and leave before the credits of their favorite show start rolling. Sometimes I wonder when exactly I disappeared. Not physically. I'm still standing there, stirring the soup, folding the napkins, but it's like I stopped being seen. Like somewhere along the line, I became a ghost in my own family. Present, but unnoticed. Essential, but unappreciated. There's a kind of loneliness that settles in when you realize you're surrounded by people who used to love you out loud, but now just tolerate you silently. It's not the loud kind of heartbreak. It's the quiet ache of being needed, but not valued, included, but not really invited. And the worst part is, I let it happen. I kept cooking. I kept saying yes. I thought if I gave enough, served enough, loved enough, they'd eventually remember what I meant to them. But now, I'm not so sure they ever really saw me to begin with. It started with a bounced check, not from me, but from the automatic payment on my gas bill. I thought there must have been a mistake, so I sat down at the kitchen table with my bank statements and a pen, determined to figure it out. What I found was a slow unraveling of years I had quietly spent. I flipped through bank records, scribbled notes in the margins, and highlighted transfers. $300 for Ryan's car repairs, $200 for Emma's dental work, $500 when Ashley said the fridge broke right before a holiday dinner. Every single one of them felt reasonable at the time. Family helps family, I told myself. But as I totaled the amounts, something in my chest began to tighten. There was $1,000 for a new laptop Ryan needed for work, and another $2,400 for a summer camp that meant everything to the kids. $600 for a vet bill I never asked about again. I remember the late-night calls, the rushed voices, the urgency. Always just this once. Always with promises to pay me back when things settled. Except they never settled, and no one ever paid me back. What struck me most wasn't the number, though $14,670.83 in 3 years is a number that makes you sit down and stare, but the ease with which it all happened. I gave because I loved them, because I thought I was helping, because saying no felt like abandonment. But as I looked closer, I noticed something I hadn't allowed myself to see before. Ashley's new handbag. The vacation photos in Florida were just 2 weeks after I helped with rent. The upgraded appliances in their kitchen, while I kept cooking on a scratched stove and using coupons at the grocery store. It didn't feel like support anymore. It felt like they were bleeding me dry, and I was too blinded by guilt and habit to notice. I sat there, surrounded by crumpled receipts and folded bank printouts, and felt a heat rise in my stomach. It wasn't just disappointment, it was betrayal, dressed up in thank yous and phone calls that only came when something was needed. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel generous. I felt used. I called Ryan that evening. My hands were still ink-stained from circling numbers, my heart pounding with a mix of nerves and certainty. When he picked up, his voice was light, distracted, like he had no idea anything was wrong. I got straight to it. I asked him if he remembered the laptop, the dental bills, and the emergency vet visit. I listed them one by one, calmly, methodically. There was a pause, then a chuckle. He said I was overthinking. Those things hadn't been easy. I always offered to help. I told him I had the bank statements right in front of me. Every transfer, every check, every Venmo. I asked why no one had ever paid me back. He got defensive. Said I was keeping score like this was some kind of loan agreement, that I was acting strangely lately. I needed to calm down. That's when something snapped, not in an angry, loud way, in a quiet, clear way that cut through everything. I told him I was done, that I wasn't his emergency bank anymore, that he and Ashley needed to figure things out on their own, like grown-ups. He tried to laugh it off, saying I was being dramatic. I didn't laugh. I didn't raise my voice. I just repeated myself. I'm not available for this anymore. I love you, but I'm not going to keep paying for your life while you treat mine like it's disposable. There was silence. A long, hollow pause. Then he said he had to go, that Ashley was calling. He didn't say thank you. He didn't say sorry. He just hung up. I sat there holding the phone, staring at the quiet screen. For the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty. I felt clear. I felt like maybe, just maybe, I was starting to remember who I was before I became the family fallback plan. The day after the phone call with Ryan, I sat in my backyard with a cup of coffee and stared at the overgrown roses Mark had planted years ago. I hadn't trimmed them in 2 summers. They were wild now, tangled and blooming in all the wrong directions. For some reason, that mess made me smile. I spent the morning in the dirt, no gloves, just my bare hands. I clipped the roses gently, repotted a stubborn fern, and pulled weeds until my arms ached. There was something deeply satisfying about it. No one needed anything from me. The sun warmed my shoulders, and the silence didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like mine. The next day I went to the library. I hadn't been in months. I wandered between shelves, ran my fingers along the spines of old novels, checked out a cookbook I'd never use, and a mystery I couldn't wait to read. I sat in a window seat for 2 hours without looking at my phone. It felt like stepping into a version of myself I hadn't seen in a long time. 1 week turned into 2, then a month. I kept waking up early, but now it was to water the garden or bake something just for me. I read. I journaled. I let the house be quiet and didn't rush to fill it. One afternoon, while picking up a few things at the community center, I noticed a flyer taped to the door. Beginner art class. No experience needed. Supplies included. I almost walked past it. Then something in me whispered, why not? The first night, I was terrified. Everyone else seemed to know each other. My hands shook as I held the pencil, and I kept apologizing for how bad my sketch looked. But no one laughed. And when I finally showed my crooked sunflower to the woman next to me, she said it looked joyful. I hadn't heard that word in a long time. That class became my favorite night of the week. It wasn't about the art, it was about the space, the permission, the tiny rebellion of doing something for no one else but me. And then came dance. There was a flyer in the same hallway. Ballroom basics. Thursday evenings. My first instinct was to roll my eyes. Me? Dancing? I hadn't danced since Mark and I used to sway barefoot in the kitchen on Sunday mornings. But I went. Out of curiosity. Out of boredom. Out of something I still couldn't name. The studio smelled faintly of wood polish and lavender. People were already moving when I walked in. I tried to sneak into the back, but a tall man in a blue button-down greeted me with the kindest smile I'd seen in years. His name was Tom. He was the instructor. He said he was glad I came. Tom was patient. When I stumbled, he made a joke. When I missed a step, he said to pretend I was just making up a new one. I laughed more in that 1 hour than I had in months. After class, he asked how long I'd been dancing. I told him I hadn't started yet. He smiled and said, "You just did." Something in me cracked open that night. Not broken, just softened. Like the shell I'd built out of disappointment and duty, it was finally letting a little light through. I went back the next Thursday. And the one after that. Tom remembered my name. He always did that little half bow before we started. It made me feel seen in a way I didn't know I'd been missing. I wasn't fixed, I wasn't fearless, but I was moving. I was beginning to believe that life could still hold new things. That maybe the version of myself I'd put on hold for decades wasn't gone. She was just waiting. For a garden. For a pencil. For a dance. For a man with kind eyes, who didn't ask for anything but one more song. Ashley texted me on a Tuesday. Short and to the point. She said they were doing a birthday dinner for her at some trendy place downtown and asked if I could make it. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. A few months ago, I would have said yes without hesitation. Cleared my calendar, baked a cake, maybe even picked up the tab. This time, I didn't feel the pull. It wasn't about resentment. I wasn't angry anymore. I just had plans. My Thursday ballroom class was the 1 hour each week that felt fully mine. And I didn't want to trade it for small talk and polite smiles in a crowded restaurant. So I typed back a sentence I'd never written to them before. I can't. I already have something. Maybe next time. And I meant it. It felt strange at first, saying no. Not out of spite, but out of self-respect. It felt like stretching a part of me that had been cramped for too long, like taking a deep breath after holding it in for years. That night, I wore a navy dress that swayed when I moved, and danced with Tom, until my cheeks hurt from smiling. I didn't check my phone once. I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. I was starting to build something, not a second life, but a fuller version of the one I already had. My mornings belonged to the garden, my afternoons to books, and my evenings, once filled with silence and reruns, were now for color and music and laughter, with people who liked me exactly as I was. Setting boundaries didn't make me cruel. It made me whole. And for the first time in a long while, my life didn't feel like something I had to explain. It just felt like mine. It happened on a Friday afternoon when I was out at the library. Ryan had a key, which I'd never thought twice about until I came home and saw the hallway closet half open, and papers scattered on the floor. At first, I thought maybe I'd forgotten something, but the living room told a different story. Someone had been searching for something. I found him in the den, holding an envelope in his hands, eyes wide like a boy caught sneaking candy. When I asked what he was doing, he mumbled something about looking for tax papers. But in his hand was no tax form. It was a letter. Mark's handwriting. One I'd never seen. He had found a box I hadn't opened in years. Inside were a dozen letters from Mark, written in the months before he passed. Love letters, yes, but also warnings. He had seen what I couldn't tolerate. He told me to protect myself. That grief would make me vulnerable. That love doesn't mean blind giving, that even our son might cross lines if I didn't draw them first. I asked Ryan why he never gave them to me. He shrugged. Said he thought they'd upset me, that I wasn't ready. But I knew the truth. Those letters didn't upset me. They freed me. With the pages still in my hand, I told him to leave. Not later. Now. He tried to talk, tried to explain, but I was done explaining. I told him this house was no longer a place where manipulation could hide under the disguise of family, that I wasn't his mother in the way he expected anymore. I was someone else now. Someone Mark would be proud of. He stood there for a second. Like he didn't know what to do without guilt as a weapon. Then he left. And I locked the door behind him. For the first time, I didn't feel like the one being abandoned. I felt chosen. By myself. By the man who saw me, even in goodbye. My days began to feel like my own again. Not borrowed, not filled with waiting, not shaped by anyone else's needs. I painted sunflowers with wide, loose strokes, and didn't care if the lines were perfect. I danced with Tom on Thursday nights, and on Sunday mornings, we drove with no destination, letting the road pick for us. I made friends in the art class, women who had raised kids, buried husbands, survived things I hadn't even imagined. We didn't talk about sadness much. We talked about color, about books, about how strange and wonderful it was to feel yourself return to life after believing your story was already written. Tom and I took a short trip to the coast, nothing fancy, just a small inn with a view of the water and time to read on the porch. One morning, he reached for my hand without saying anything. I didn't pull away. I let it rest there, warm and sure, like the first part of me to stop apologizing for being happy. Then, one afternoon, my phone rang. It was Ryan. His voice was quieter than I remembered, slower. He said he'd been thinking, that he hadn't handled things right, that he missed me. He didn't ask for money. He didn't make excuses. He asked if we could meet, not to go back to how it was, but to start again, better. I told him yes, but I also told him things were different now, that he was welcome in my life, but only if he walked in the front door with respect and left the old patterns behind. I wasn't angry anymore. I just didn't have space for anything less than real love. We met for coffee. He apologized. Not with flowers or gifts, but with his eyes and his words. It was enough. Not everything, but enough to believe maybe we both had room to grow. Later that week, I went to the community center. The room was full of people and music and light. Tom reached for my hand. I stepped into his arms without hesitation. As we danced, I didn't think about what I'd lost. I didn't ache for the years I gave away. I felt the rhythm, the floor under my feet, the smile on my face. At 59, I wasn't mourning what I'd lost. I was finally discovering what I could still gain.